He came to Birmingham in search of the perfect wife, and everyone thought he would choose the beautiful one. But to everyone's surprise, he rejected the one who shone and chose the sister who lived in silence, a woman without jewels, without forced laughter, but with a soul impossible to ignore. He turned down the beautiful sister and chose the one everyone overlooked. What no one imagined was that this choice would spark a story shaped by pride, sacrifice, and a love that would change their lives forever. From which corner of the world are you joining us today? And tell me, have you ever felt like the one nobody sees? The earth still held the damp scent of March rains, and the hills surrounding the Wycliffe estate rose like weary guardians of a glorious past, slipping away without remedy. The manor, with its whitewashed walls and tall windows, had once hosted dazzling receptions where rural nobility gathered to honor the Countess of Wycliffe, Lady Margaret, a proud widow fiercely protective of her lineage. But now the furniture groaned under the weight of time, the tapestries had dulled, and the English porcelain lay untouched behind dusty glass, waiting for guests who would never return. Amid this noble silence lived her two daughters. Lady Catherine, the younger, walked with the ease of someone who had never known what it was to be ignored. Her hair was the color of spring honey, and her beauty, radiant, evident, undeniable, made men turn their heads and women press their lips. Her voice struck the perfect chord between sweetness and strategy, and her laughter, when heard, bloomed exactly where the gazes fell. Lady Eleanor, on the other hand, was the elder. No one could quite recall whether she had been pretty as a child. A faint birthmark graced her left cheek like a dark blossom out of place. She walked with a slight imbalance, a lasting gift of a childhood fever that had left her with a limp. Her step was always cautious, restrained, as though fearful of treading where she wasn't wanted. Her brown hair was gathered simply, without ribbons or pearls. Her eyes, gray like the moor's morning mist, observed the world with quiet resignation. While Catherine ruled the drawing rooms, Eleanor reigned in corners no one entered. She preferred the conservatory, where she tended to camellias and violets with silent devotion. Her wardrobe, always in muted tones like pearl gray, navy blue, or olive green, drew no attention, and she knew it. She accepted invisibility, the way one accepts shadow when the sun has already chosen another face to shine on. Lady Margaret, ever vigilant and calculating, knew her family name teetered on the edge of ruin. The gold had died with her late husband. The land was fertile but insufficient, and their salvation rested solely on the delicate hope of a favorable marriage. Catherine was her jewel, her strongest bet. Eleanor, a worthy piece, yes, but with no shine for society's game, and yet Eleanor was the one who most resembled her father, the one who never broke. That day the estate was prepared with the care of great occasions. The Dowager Countess ordered the crystal glasses from Catherine's christening to be brought out, and the maids dusted the lace cushions in the main parlor. They were expecting a visit from Lord Alistair Montgomery, Marquess of Linwood, heir to a modest yet steady fortune, bearing a title that still made young debutantes hold their fans a little tighter. It was said the Marquess, 35 years old, was seeking a wife. Not love nor passion nor adoration, just a respectable name, a proper, quiet woman who wouldn't disrupt his routine, his books, or his thoughts. Some whispered he had once been widowed. Others claimed he had never loved at all, perhaps only once, and that, since then, his heart had slept like stone at the bottom of a well. When his carriage crossed the stone threshold of Wycliffe Estate, Catherine's eyes lit up like freshly polished gold. She wore a white muslin dress embroidered with pink, cinched at the waist with a satin ribbon. Her hair flowed in soft waves, framing a perfect smile. Eleanor, meanwhile, was in the garden, clipping dry stems with her hands still stained with soil. She was not summoned to greet him, Afternoon tea was served beneath the wisteria in the inner courtyard. The soft glow of twilight fell across linen tablecloths and enamel teacups. Lady Margaret spoke with carefully measured elegance. Catherine laughed as if each sound were a promise of tomorrow. Eleanor, seated slightly apart, drank her tea with the same composure she brought to every day, expecting nothing. Then, without raising his voice, Lord Montgomery spoke. "With all due respect to this house and to the Countess," he said, glancing at Lady Margaret, "I would like to request permission to court Miss Eleanor." The silence was as thick as the blackberry jam on the table. Lady Margaret dropped her spoon. Catherine blinked, her smile cracking like glass beneath a boot. Eleanor merely lowered her gaze. A gentle breeze lifted a strand of hair from her temple, and for a moment her eyes met the Marquess's, and he hesitated, not in his words, but in his soul. Something in that woman, who had always been there, quiet, unassuming, struck him like a memory forgotten, as if he had seen her before in another time or another dream. It wasn't love, it wasn't desire, it was something more primitive and unsettling, a presence, a silent truth, a question without form. Eleanor said nothing, but in her eyes, gray as the mist before a storm, there was something the Marquess could not decipher. He only knew one thing. He had looked, but he had not been the one to see first, and in that garden of wisteria, beneath the trembling porcelain and the breathless silence, began the fate of a woman who had grown used to being unseen, and of a man who, without knowing it yet, had just been called to notice what no one ever did. The day after Lord Alistair Montgomery's unexpected proposal dawned gray, as if the skies themselves doubted the direction the Wycliffe estate had just taken. In the halls, echoes still lingered, of spoons halted mid-air, of Lady Margaret's sudden chair scrape, of the silence that followed his announcement. Catherine said nothing during breakfast. Her lips, usually adorned with calculated smiles, remained closed, as if any attempt to speak might fracture her composure. Lady Margaret, on her part, moved with brisk steps, fury held tight beneath the weight of her noble name. She spoke, no words of reproach allowed, but her gaze hardened each time it landed on Eleanor, as if blaming her, silently, for accepting a fate she had not even sought. That morning, a brief note reached Eleanor's hands. It was written in firm, unadorned script and signed with restrained initials, A.M. It requested her presence in the Marquess's study, temporarily arranged in the library of the East Wing. There was no please, no excuse, no pleasantry, just the direct words of a man speaking from distance, not desire. Eleanor did not reply. She rose from her chair, left her embroidery on the marble table, and walked down the corridor with the serenity of one who expects nothing, and therefore fears nothing she might hear. The library was lit by a tall window that let in the dull morning light. Lord Montgomery stood with his hands clasped behind his back, studying a globe as though he could turn time to his will. His attire was impeccably austere, a dark frock coat, wool trousers, a burgundy vest without embellishment. His profile, caught in the pale light, looked sculpted hard, as if his flesh had accepted long ago to live within unbreakable stone. Eleanor made no announcement. She simply waited, and he, without looking at her, spoke. "I won't waste time with pleasantries," he said in a low, unaffected tone. "What I proposed yesterday was not born of impulse or affection. It was a considered decision." She didn't move. Her fingers simply intertwined at her waist. "My mother spoke to me this morning," he continued. "She wants to know my precise intentions. I imagine you do too." For a moment Eleanor thought of denying it, but it wasn't true. She expected nothing, but she did deserve clarity. She gave the slightest nod. Lord Montgomery turned, his gaze cutting through without ever touching. His dark eyes were at once wall and well. "My proposal is simple," he said calmly. "Marriage, a union of bloodlines, mutual respect, and social discretion. I am not seeking love, companionship, or emotion. You owe me no affection. I will offer no tenderness, only security, a preserved name, and a life without scandal. That is my offer." Something stirred inside Eleanor, not pain, not humiliation. It was recognition. At last, someone had seen her without cloaking it in illusion, and in that honesty, harsh as it was, there was a strange kind of respect. And, "Why me?" she asked softly, without bitterness. "You could choose many," he didn't hesitate. "Because you are safe, not dangerous. You don't seek to please. You don't impose. You don't play games." There was such deliberate coldness in his words that it sounded like a transaction. And yet, beneath that layer of ice, Eleanor sensed a tension, as if each sentence was a shield, carefully forged to hide a lingering wound. "May I speak plainly?" she asked. He gave a slight nod. "I'm not offended by your proposal. Apoy, lie would offend me, and you haven't told one. So yes, my lord, I accept." Lord Montgomery did not smile. He simply nodded like one signing a contract. Eleanor offered a short curtsy and withdrew. There was no emotion in her steps, no haste, no flush of color, only the calm resignation of someone who has lived in the shadows and learned to find comfort in the dimness. Catherine was behind the lattice in the corridor when Eleanor returned, her painted lips pressed into a thin line. She said nothing, but her eyes flashed with a venomous gleam of wounded pride. For her, the humiliation was not the Marquess's rejection. It was the fact that the woman she had always looked down upon would now become the lawful wife of the man she had wanted for herself. That night, as the maids cleared the linens, and the house quieted beneath the sound of wind brushing the beams, Eleanor made her way to the reading room. She picked up a velvet-bound book and sat beside the oil lamp. She did not cry. She didn't even consider it. Her soul had been trained not to waste itself on the useless. From the hallway, footsteps echoed. It was Lord Montgomery's maid, a sharp-eyed brunette named Marina, carrying a tray of documents and an empty glass. Eleanor looked up when she noticed her pause. "Do you need something, Marina?" The young woman shook her head gently. "No, madam, but—" She hesitated briefly. "The Marquess spoke this afternoon with Captain Aranda, his old friend. They didn't know I was in the vestibule." Eleanor didn't answer. She only lifted an eyebrow with quiet interest. "He said—" Marina paused again. "He said, she isn't dangerous. She's invisible. That's why I chose her. She won't hurt me." Eleanor closed the book without force. Her face didn't change. Only her jaw tightened slightly. "Thank you, Marina. You may go." When the door closed, Eleanor allowed herself a moment of absolute silence. Her fingers ran along the book's cover. Invisible, not dangerous. Words tossed like soft knives. They didn't hurt. They only confirmed what she had always known. But for some reason, that night, she refused to fade. She refused to sleep. She refused to vanish. She stayed there, with the lamp still burning, reading without truly absorbing the words, staring without really seeing. And in that space, suspended between duty and resignation, she felt something subtle, not hope, not pride, but a fragile fiber that refused to break. The soul of someone long denied, who still breathed. Elsewhere in the house, Lord Montgomery spoke to his maid. He had removed his coat and paced his study with an untouched glass in hand. Marina watched in silence, awaiting instructions. "What? If I wasn't wrong?" he murmured, half to himself. Marina said nothing. "Emotions," he added, "are a weakness, one I've already paid for." Marina offered a small bow. He set the glass on the desk and turned to the window. "A woman who doesn't demand is a woman who's safe," he went on. "The rest I don't need." But his eyes weren't looking at the fields. They were watching his own reflection in the glass, as if searching for a certainty he had yet to find. And so night fell over Wycliffe Estate. In one room, a woman read in silence, without tears. In another, a man took refuge behind his own walls. Neither of them knew that in the deepest corner of what went unsaid, a seed had already been planted. It wasn't love, not yet tenderness, but it was the first crack in the wall. And for two broken souls, that was already too much. Spring clung stubbornly to the hills of Birmingham, as if refusing to yield its place to the dry heat of summer. The days grew longer, the camellias began to wither, and the wisteria, which had once witnessed the unexpected announcement, now gave in to the wind, dropping pale lilac petals onto the stone benches like quiet surrenders. Since the formal engagement between Lord Alistair Montgomery and Lady Eleanor Wycliffe, life at the estate had shifted, though no one dared to say it aloud. The Marquess visited regularly, but with the demeanor of a man surveying land before construction. He walked the halls with purpose, reviewed the grounds, spoke with Lady Margaret about property lines and finances, and received reports from the steward without raising his voice or inviting familiarity. With Eleanor, the dynamic was different, or rather, almost non-existent. They occasionally crossed paths in the music room or the library, but their exchanges never went beyond politeness. There were no gestures of warmth, not even of curiosity. And yet, there was something in the way he subtly turned his head whenever she entered a room. Just a second, a nearly imperceptible pause in his reading or walking, as if he sensed her presence and didn't know what to do with it. Eleanor, for her part, expected nothing. She had already accepted that her life would move along the narrow path of duty. No surprises, no promises. And yet, each time she saw him cross the courtyard, his frock coat unbuttoned and hands behind his back, her heartbeat shifted rhythm. Not out of hope, but something quieter. A tension she couldn't explain, one that kept her awake at night, staring at pages she couldn't read. One afternoon, while carefully pruning a wild rose bush at the far edge of the garden, Eleanor's heard footsteps on the gravel. She didn't look up. The warm sun touched her neck, and the earth smelled of fresh sap. She held the shears as though they were an extension of her thoughts, trimming what needed to go without regret. "Do you tend these flowers yourself?" a voice asked behind her. It was deep and calm, lacking affection, yet not unkind. Eleanor didn't turn. "I prefer things that grow in silence," she replied, as naturally as if commenting on the weather. Lord Montgomery didn't answer. He stood there for a moment, as if searching for something he couldn't find in her words. Then he walked away, leaving behind a heavy presence, full of something unnamed. That night, when Eleanor entered the reading room in search of a volume of Rousseau's essays, she noticed something strange on the center table. Resting on the polished mahogany was her favorite book, Voltaire's Philosophical Letters. The old gilded binding had been cleaned, perfect, as though untouched by time. She had searched for it weeks earlier with no luck. Now it was there. Beside it lay a small folded note in a firm, spare hand. "You are not insignificant." I didn't know how to see. No signature. None was needed. Eleanor picked up the book with steady hands, but her chest tightened. What she felt wasn't emotion, nor relief. It was a kind of aching recognition. She told no one, asked no questions. She simply went upstairs, sat before her vanity, and placed the note inside the jewelry box where she kept her father's cameo. The next evening, without planning to, without much thought, she left a bundle of fresh lavender wrapped in a white handkerchief on the piano bench in the main drawing room. It wasn't a reply, it was a way to continue something that had begun without words. By dawn, the lavender was gone, and so began a silent language, spoken through gestures. A cup of tea discreetly left on the gallery table, a book placed on a garden bench, a handkerchief forgotten on a music stand. Later returned, neatly folded. Neither spoke of it. Neither acknowledged the growing presence, each now occupied in the other's days. From a second-floor window, Catherine watched. Always elegant, always alert, she pretended to embroider, while her eyes tracked her sister's movements like a game of chess she could no longer master. Inside, something boiled. It wasn't just jealousy, it was confusion. How could such an ordinary woman hold the attention of a man she herself had failed to impress? How could a sister who never stood out at dances, who couldn't sing with charm or recite verse gracefully, begin to take a place Catherine had long reserved for herself? She didn't speak of it to her mother. Lady Margaret, still clinging to the hope of a favorable match, remained focused on the finer points of the marriage contract rather than the heart of the relationship. And yet, in her quietest moments, even she began to sense that something unexpected was taking root between the future spouses. Eleanor didn't know if what she felt was comfort, dizziness, or fear. What she did know was that each gesture, each absence filled with presence, was beginning to change her. Not because she dreamed of love, not because she believed in happy endings, but because for the first time in her life, someone had started to see her without asking her to be someone else. Lord Montgomery, for his part, didn't fully understand what was happening. His once orderly routine had started to shift in subtle ways. He spent more time in the library, wandered the gardens without purpose, and every time he found a carefully arranged flower in some hidden corner, his step slowed. One afternoon, entering the drawing room, he found the white handkerchief with lavender stitching draped over the piano bench. He held it for a few seconds, then tucked it into the inner pocket of his coat. He told no one. But that night, before sleep, he placed it on his desk, beside the inkwell and his business correspondence. In the dim light of his study, he sat by the fire and closed his eyes. He wasn't thinking of tenderness or duty. He simply remembered her, bent over the soil in the garden, hands covered in earth, her face at peace. And for the first time in many years, he wondered if there was value in things that didn't shine. Across the house, Eleanor slept with her window slightly open. The scent of lavender drifted through the air. On her nightstand lay a book bound in blue velvet. They had exchanged no meaningful words, no conversation worth repeating, but they were already speaking, and what that silence said was starting to matter more than any promise. The last week of April arrived with the scent of freshly plowed fields and a sky so clear it seemed to offend those who carried storms within. Wycliffe Estate lay under that uneasy calm that precedes disorder. There were fresh flowers in the vases, spotless corridors, and silence lodged deep in every heart. Catherine returned one afternoon wrapped in mauve silk, her golden hair comb gleaming, her step light with the confidence of someone accustomed to admiration. She had just come back from a brief stay at her cousin Charlotte's home in Warwickshire, where she had attended soirees, riverside strolls, and parlor games in which her laughter had echoed with carefully measured sparkle. She returned with a different air, haughtier, sharper, as though her short time away had restored a shine she feared she'd lost. She embraced her mother with enthusiasm, kissed Eleanor's forehead with a surprising warmth, and complimented the rose bush blooming in the courtyard. But when her eyes met the Marquess's, they darkened with something else. It wasn't longing. It was calculation, pride, bruised and wrapped in velvet. Eleanor didn't need words to understand that her sister had come back changed. Catherine had discovered or decided something during her trip. And though her lips still smiled, as always, her words began to carry hidden blades. In the days that followed, conversation at the dining table, in the music room, or even in the north, wing hallway became fertile ground for her disguised remarks. If anyone mentioned Eleanor's engagement to Lord Montgomery, Catherine would smile thoughtfully and murmur, "Ah yes, Eleanor has always been so meticulous, very good with ledgers and inventory. I suppose someone has to handle those things." On another occasion, while flipping through a book of botanical prints in the gallery, she commented sweetly, "Eleanor has a remarkable talent for practical matters. Planting, bookkeeping, pantry organization. It's like having a housekeeper, born into nobility." Eleanor didn't reply. Her silence was not submission. but a form of dignity that kept her standing tall even as others tried to pull her down. One evening, during a dinner attended by Lord Montgomery, the atmosphere thickened. There was roast pheasant, sherry wine, and a fruit tart no one touched. Catherine chatted animatedly about events in Warwickshire, eligible young ladies, and French music at the dances. Eleanor listened quietly, her gaze lowered, as though none of it concerned her. And then, like someone tossing a stone into still water to watch the ripples, Catherine said with falsely innocent delight, "At my cousin's, someone asked me what Eleanor was like. And I simply said the obvious. She's very capable, an expert in crops, taxes, and figures. Though I'm not sure that's enough to win a heart. Wouldn't you agree, my lord?" The silence that followed was heavy, like a wet cloth dropped over the table. Lord Montgomery, who had been eating without looking up, paused with his glass halfway to his lips and regarded her with an expression that wasn't quite anger, but something unmistakably close to quiet contempt. "What sustains a legacy is never dull," he said evenly. "What's truly tiresome is purposeless frivolity." Catherine blanched. Lady Margaret cleared her throat and pressed a napkin to her lips, pretending not to hear. Eleanor felt a strange tightening in her chest. It wasn't joy, nor relief. It was a mix of astonishment and something deeper than gratitude, something she couldn't name. Later that night, as she walked down the corridor toward her room, she saw him standing by the large window overlooking the camellia garden. His hands were in the pockets of his frock coat, his gaze lost in the dark. "Thank you," Eleanor said, stopping a few steps away. Lord Montgomery turned slightly. "It wasn't for you," he replied. "It was for the truth," Eleanor nodded, and before leaving, added gently, "Then thank you for not hiding it." He said nothing more, but he looked at her with different eyes, softer, less guarded, as if, for just a moment, he allowed himself to lower his defenses, as if he was beginning to see that Eleanor was not merely a safe choice. She was a presence, quiet, yes, but steady, and that was starting to unnerve him more than he'd admit. The following morning, the family made their usual Sunday trip to the chapel atop the hill, where generations of Wycliffes rested beneath moss-covered marble. Eleanor entered wearing her black lace shawl, a simple rosary threaded between her fingers. Her steps were steady, her head uncovered, and the cool mountain air brought color to her cheeks. During Mass, she never raised her eyes. She listened to each word from the priest, as though reading an ancient contract between her soul and fate. When it came time to cross herself, she did so slowly, sealing something that could not be undone. Turning toward the side altar, she met her mother's eyes. Lady Margaret's expression was more severe than Eleanor had ever seen. Her right hand, still lifted after the final Amen, trembled slightly. Her lips were pressed tight, as if a long unspoken confession had lodged in her throat. They exchanged no words, only that long, weighty look, filled with unspoken warnings and secrets that refused to die. It was as if her mother had seen something she couldn't name, as if she sensed that everything she had planned was beginning to crack. Eleanor stepped out of the chapel with the wind in her eyes and her heart in an uncertain place. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible, and not because someone had pointed to her or spoken her name with admiration, but because slowly she had stopped needing it. She didn't know if what was growing was love. She didn't know if Lord Montgomery looked at her with tenderness or simply with respect. But something new had taken root within her, a strength that depended on no one, a root sprouting from within, like those wildflowers that, even without a gardener, dare to bloom between stones. May arrived draped in golden light and warm wind. Sunlight filtered through the almond trees along the old road, and Wycliffe Estate woke each morning in a hush of new leaves and wild scents. There was a different stillness in the air, as if something invisible and still unnamed was slowly forming in the quiet corners of the house. For some weeks now, Lord Alistair Montgomery had been spending more time at the estate. He no longer limited himself to meetings with Lady Margaret or the steward's reports. He began walking the vineyard paths, inspecting the irrigation channels, pausing near the wheat fields that still awaited harvest, and on those walks, without announcement or formality, Eleanor began to accompany him. They didn't do so in public view or during the busiest hours of the day. They went out after lunch when the house drifted into its drowsy stillness, or in the evenings as the sky turned. Coral and the last birds circled above the orchards. They walked without rush. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't. "Have you always preferred the countryside to the city?" she asked during one such walk as they stepped carefully along a path lined with stones and gorse. "The countryside asks nothing of you," he replied, eyes fixed on the horizon. "The city demands masks. Out here, you can be silent without being questioned." Eleanor nodded. She understood that better than most. What it meant to live unseen, unexamined. Another day they spoke of books. He mentioned Montaigne. She brought up Pascal. They debated in low voices the weight of unmade decisions and the quiet power of ideas. At one point, a brief, reluctant laugh escaped Eleanor when Alistair recounted a childhood memory. "Falling into a pond while chasing a frog. I never knew why I wanted to catch it," he confessed, with a flicker of light in his eyes. "I only remember the cold water and my mother's laugh. The last time I ever heard it." Eleanor paused, half-turned toward him. The breeze tossed her hair, and a strand brushed her cheek. She said nothing, but her silence wrapped around him like warmth. It was the kind of silence that doesn't weigh, doesn't press, it simply stays. Another day, as they crossed a footbridge over a small stream, Eleanor stopped to watch the rippling reflections in the water. "My lord," she said softly, but firmly, "why did you choose me?" He went still. Her question carried no accusation, not even curiosity. It was simple, but heavy in ways words couldn't measure. He took a moment to answer. "Because you weren't going to ask anything of me," he said without looking at her. "Because I thought, with you, I'd be safe." Eleanor nodded, slowly, keeping her eyes on him. "And now?" The Marquess clenched his fists inside his coat pockets. He drew a deep breath. "Now, I'm afraid. I might be the one who needs you," he admitted. In a whisper, the wind carried off through the reeds. No more words followed. They continued walking. They didn't touch. They didn't look at each other. But the space between them had changed. Heavier, closer. They were no longer two figures sharing a path. They were two souls beginning to recognize each other in what wasn't said. That night, the house slept under the distant song of a nightingale. Eleanor was climbing the stairs to her room when she saw him, Lord Montgomery, walking the opposite direction, holding an oil lamp. He wore a dark velvet dressing robe, and his hair was slightly tousled, as if his thoughts had kept him from sleep. They met on the landing. Neither spoke. Eleanor gave a slight nod. He returned it silently. And as they passed one another, their hands brushed. It wasn't abrupt nor accidental. It was the gentlest of touches, just a whisper of skin, but enough for both of them to pause for a breathless instant. They didn't look at each other. They didn't apologize. They simply felt. And what they felt lingered in the air like an unspoken promise. Eleanor continued to her room, so did Alistair. But when she arrived, she found herself touching the exact place where they'd made contact. Something had changed. She couldn't explain it, but she knew. The next day, while searching for a notebook in the library, Eleanor noticed an old sheet of music tucked among the central shelves. A single page, yellowed with age, its notes hand-drawn, some crossed out, others delicately corrected. She recognized it. It had been composed by Alistair's father, a man said to have played piano as if in conversation with fate. As Eleanor leaned forward to retrieve it, Lord Montgomery entered the study. He stopped when he saw her. For a moment, their eyes met. Eleanor held the page in one hand. He looked at it with a flicker of discomfort and something deeper, as if that music held a memory he wasn't ready to face. "It's nothing," he said quickly, stepping forward to take it from her. "Just an old exercise." He folded it carefully and locked it away in a drawer. Eleanor didn't press, but she looked at him, and in her gaze he saw that she understood more than she let on. That night, as the moon rose over the estate's tiled roofs, Eleanor sat by her window. She opened a blank notebook and began to write, not with literary intent, but simply for herself, to remember the details, the tremor in a voice, the brush of a hand, the confession of a fear, the music left unfinished, because sometimes love doesn't arrive like thunder or fire. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in shared footsteps, in words that don't try to charm, in glances that don't hold, but don't flee either. And, for a soul like hers, that was more than enough to keep walking, even without knowing where the road might lead, even if no one was watching. Mornings at Wycliffe Estate were no longer peaceful. The sun still gilded the rooftops, birds still sang among the orange trees in the courtyard, but the air had thickened, as if something unspoken hung in every corner. The approaching wedding wasn't felt as cause for celebration, but rather as an inevitable event that everyone acknowledged, but no one dared to speak of aloud. Eleanor spent more and more time in the garden. Among gravel paths and rows of lavender, she found a quiet that the house no longer offered. She pruned, transplanted, sorted bulbs with near ritual precision. Sometimes she worked with bare hands, as if needing the feel of soil to remember who she was. It was on a cloudy morning that she found the note, folded carefully inside her gardening basket. Between the pruning shears and a spool of hemp twine, the paper was plain. No crest, no ornament. She unfolded it and read a single sentence, written in a firm hand, slightly slanted to the right. "Your absence is more unsettling than your presence." No signature, no date, nothing else. Eleanor stood still, note between her fingers, while the nearby almond tree swayed gently. She felt no joy, no confusion, just a deep, quiet emotion, like a warm gust passing through her chest. Someone had named her without naming her. Someone had thought of her. And not to wish her silence, she said nothing. Slipped the note into the folds of her dress and continued working with her usual composure. But that night, before bed, she placed it inside her jewelry box, beside another unsigned note, older now, the one that spoke of looking and not truly seeing. She didn't need proof. She knew who it came from. In the days that followed, the tension in the house sharpened. Catherine had returned from Warwickshire with her nerves exposed. She walked in short, hurried steps and spoke too loudly, even when she had nothing of substance to say. She pretended to care little for the wedding preparations, but each time someone said Eleanor's name, her lips trembled slightly. One afternoon, watching her sister pass by with a roll of white fabric for the veil, Catherine clenched her porcelain teacup so tightly it cracked. She didn't say a word, just went upstairs, and didn't come down for the rest of the day. "I can still stop it," she whispered that night, brushing her hair in front of the mirror. "There's still time. He doesn't love her. He'll never look at her the way he looks at me." But there was no one left in the room to listen. Meanwhile, Lady Margaret had become a silent figure haunting the corridors, barking orders at the maids, demanding quiet, forbidding questions. Her voice, usually sharp, had taken on a lower, more urgent tone. One evening she intercepted Eleanor in the private chapel where the young woman often went to pray alone. "You have no idea what's at stake," the Countess said, her lips tight. "Don't ruin this with sentiment or scruples. Obey. And do it with dignity." Eleanor met her gaze calmly. She didn't argue. Her obedience wasn't born of fear, but of a duty she had chosen to fulfill, even if she didn't yet know the cost. And as rumors bloomed like spring weeds, someone planted a cruel doubt that quickly spread among servants and even the most discreet guests. They say, Lady Eleanor, due to her fragile health, may not be able to bear children. Who says that? Catherine's cousin hinted at it, that her childhood fever left consequences. The rumor spread like flame over dry straw. No one said it to her face, but she felt it. In the odd whispers that died when she entered, in the sudden awkwardness when someone mentioned children, heirs, or baptisms. Eleanor didn't defend herself, didn't ask for clarifications. Dignity isn't something you beg for. The wedding day arrived without trumpets or fanfare. There were no illustrious guests, no grand feast. The ceremony was held in the estate's chapel, with polished wooden pews covered in white cloth, wildflowers from the fields, and the distant toll of a bell that rang out of duty, not joy. Eleanor wore a gown of raw satin, without embroidery or pearls. Her veil fell from a simple mother-of-pearl comb, no crown of orange blossoms, only a small bouquet of lavender and hawthorn, which she held with the same calm she had carried all her life. Lord Montgomery waited by the altar. He wore a dark gray coat, a pearl-colored silk waistcoat, and a white cravat. His expression was composed but not relaxed. In his eyes there was a shadow, not doubt, not sorrow. Something else, something deeper, unspeakable. The priest read the familiar words. The congregation responded to the prayers in hushed tones. Lady Margaret crossed herself with the fervor of one who hopes salvation will arrive like a carefully calculated blessing, and Catherine did not cry, but her fingernails left marks in the fan, clenched between her hands. Throughout the ceremony, Eleanor didn't tremble, didn't falter, didn't seek his gaze nor look away. She answered each question with a steady voice, like someone who knows there is no turning back from the choice she's made. Alistair, on the other hand, glanced at her from the side, not in shame, not in rejection. He looked at her like one studies a riddle, like someone trying to understand why such a quiet, modest presence unsettled him more than everything he had tried to avoid. When the priest spoke the final blessing, there was no applause. Just the shuffle of shoes on stone, a few cold congratulations, and the promise of a modest luncheon for the few in attendance. As they exited the chapel, sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time that day, and though no one said it aloud, everyone felt it. This wedding was not a beginning, it was a crossing, a quiet one, a dangerous one, and perhaps a final one. Eleanor descended the steps with steady steps. Alistair followed. They didn't speak. They didn't touch, but as they walked together toward the carriage, their shadows merged on the ground. And perhaps, though neither of them knew it yet, that was the first sign of something that refused to remain in silence, even if it bore no signature, even if it had no name. The morning after the wedding rose under a heavy fog that slipped through the fields like a veil hiding everything. Unspoken words, unfinished promises, suspended feelings. Wycliffe Estate stirred as if nothing had changed, and yet, within its walls, something had been sealed under the weight of silence. Eleanor awoke before the sun, not from anxiety or restlessness, but because her body, so long trained in duty and discipline, didn't know how to remain still when the world asked for motion. She lay there a few minutes, eyes fixed on the canopy above, not thinking, not feeling. Her veil was still folded neatly on the oak chair, her satin wedding dress hanging nearby, covered with a linen sheet. No one had helped her out of it the night before. She had gone upstairs alone, closed the door with her own hand, and fallen asleep without tears. The east wing, where Lord Montgomery slept, had no secret doors or convenient corridors leading to hers. He did not appear. He didn't knock. He sent no message, no request. The house, as always, respected his rules. The maids cleared away the remains of the wedding meal without a word. The altar was dismantled without ceremony, and the priest departed with a modest purse and a weary expression. The days that followed carried the same restrained tone. Eleanor took on her new duties as lady of the house. She oversaw the kitchens, organized the account books, reviewed the winter stores, spoke to the staff with gentle but firm authority. Lord Montgomery, for his part, spent long hours in his study or the library. Sometimes he rode out at dawn. Sometimes he left without a word and returned after sunset. They rarely shared meals, only at formal occasions, and when they did, conversation was brief, respectful, but devoid of warmth. No one in the house commented on the distance. Everyone understood this marriage had not been forged from affection or desire, but necessity. And yet, something had begun to shift. One June afternoon, while the summer heat still hesitated, Eleanor awoke with a deep, unmistakable ache. Her throat burned, her head felt unbearably heavy, and her limbs were like lead. She tried to stand, but the room spun violently. Around her, she collapsed back onto the bed, too weak to call out. A maid found her hours later, still in her dressing gown, her face flushed with fever, her body clammy with cold sweat. The alarm spread quietly through the house. There were no cries, no frantic rushing, but doors closed swiftly, footsteps quickened, and the doctor was summoned at once. Lord Montgomery entered the room without announcement. He found Eleanor lying pale and motionless, her lips parted, her breathing shallow. He didn't ask questions. He didn't wait for permission. He removed his coat, rolled up his sleeves, and took the chair beside her. For the nights that followed, he never left her side. He cared for her with a steadiness that surprised even the staff. He placed cool cloths on her forehead, held her head as she sipped broth, moistened her lips with sugar water. He spoke no comforting words, made no grand gestures. He simply stayed, firm and silent, a constant presence. It was Marina, Eleanor's maid, who found the note. While tidying the clothes that had been left at the foot of the bed, she discovered a folded piece of paper tucked in the folds of the apron. She recognized the handwriting immediately. She didn't deliver it right. Away, she waited until the fever broke, and when Eleanor's eyes finally opened, clear though still tired, Marina placed the note in her hand without saying a word. Eleanor didn't ask. She recognized it instantly. She didn't read it. She didn't have to. She slipped it beneath her pillow. Later, when her strength returned enough to sit up, she placed it inside the small marquetry box on her vanity, the same one where she kept other unsigned messages. She closed the lid gently, as if it held something fragile that couldn't be broken. Lord Montgomery watched her from the chair beside the bed. He said nothing, but his eyes, for the first time, were no longer those of a distant husband. They were the eyes of a man who was finally seeing. He saw the pallor of her skin, the loose strands of hair at her neck, the faint shadows beneath her gray eyes. He saw the woman he had chosen for security, for convenience, out of fear. And yet now, that same woman stirred something unfamiliar in him, as if her frailty had revealed a strength he hadn't dared to recognize. When she looked back at him, he didn't turn away. They remained there, wordless, still, but connected by something deeper than obligation. It wasn't pity, it wasn't gratitude, it was a beginning, just a flicker of something that might become something they didn't yet know how to name. In the nights that followed, Eleanor slept with steadier breath. The fever eased. Lord Montgomery continued by her side, reading softly from old books, as though the sound of his voice could keep her tethered between dream and reality. He didn't offer tenderness, he offered presence. And for her, that meant more than any promise. On the fourth day, when the doctor declared the worst had passed, Lord Montgomery gave a quiet nod of thanks. He left the room only when Marina insisted Eleanor needed uninterrupted rest. That night, Eleanor stayed awake a long time. She listened to the hush of the house, the muffled steps in the hallway, the distant crackle of the kitchen fire, and, In that silence, she recalled each moment of her illness, the hand that held hers without grasping, the voice that gently called her back when fever pulled her under, the cold cloth on her brow, the cup of water offered without a word. They weren't acts of love, not yet, but they were acts of care, of real presence, and for a woman who had lived in the shadows, chosen for being unseen, that was a new kind of light, not blinding, but warm. The days passed. Eleanor regained her strength slowly. Lord Montgomery returned to his routines, though now his footsteps slowed slightly whenever he passed her door. They didn't speak of what had happened. They didn't name what they'd shared, but something had opened between them, something that couldn't be undone, because sometimes what grows from silence roots deeper, and what isn't said, when it is tended, starts to speak on its own. Eleanor recovered slowly, but she was no longer the same. The illness, which had touched her body with burning fingers, had left behind more than weakness. Something in her gaze had changed. It wasn't pride nor defiance, it was presence, a quiet strength born from knowing she had survived, and from knowing she was being seen. She returned to her duties with the same dignity that had always accompanied her, but now her steps carried a more deliberate rhythm. She didn't avoid glances. She didn't step aside when others spoke. She moved through the house as someone who knew every corner and no longer needed permission to belong there. The maids noticed it first, then the footman, and finally, Lord Montgomery. He said nothing, made no remarks about her movements or words. But every time she entered a room, his eyes followed her, not with desire, not with idle curiosity, but with the attention one gives to something that grows in silence, something that suddenly feels essential, and that unsettled him. Alistair, so accustomed to the absolute control of his emotions, began to avoid her without realizing it. He left earlier in the mornings, spent longer hours locked in his study, filled his evenings writing letters he never sent. When they spoke over meals, his tone was polite but clipped, and there was a tension in his manner that hadn't been there before. Eleanor understood. She didn't take it as rejection, but as resistance. She knew, without needing to be told, that something inside him was beginning to shift. And she also knew that in a man like him, such change never happened without a fight. One afternoon, while reviewing the storage inventories together, their fingers brushed as they turned the ledger pages. It was accidental, fleeting, but he pulled his hand back quickly, as if he had touched something that burned. Eleanor looked up. She didn't reproach him. Her expression was calm, steady, and that, more than anything, disarmed him. "You don't have to be afraid of me," she said quietly. Alistair frowned, eyes still on the page. "I'm not afraid of you," he said. "I'm afraid of myself." That night, Eleanor climbed the stairs with a heart full of questions, though peaceful. Her steps held no urgency, only a quiet anticipation. She sensed something was close to breaking, not in him, but in the image he had of himself, and she was right. That same night, when the house had gone still and the candles flickered out one by one, Eleanor went to the library in search of a book. She entered with a lit lamp, letting its golden glow fall across the high shelves, the heavy drapes, the velvet-upholstered furniture. The air smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. Then she saw him. Lord Montgomery sat by the desk, elbows resting on the surface, head bowed forward. He wasn't reading. He wasn't writing. He simply sat there, frozen in a posture of weariness or reflection. Eleanor didn't move, neither did he. The tension in the room was so dense it seemed to press against the air. "I wasn't expecting company," he said at last, without looking up. "I just came for a book." He nodded, said nothing more. Eleanor walked slowly to the far shelf. She chose a book at random, not even glancing at the title. As she retraced her steps, she passed the upright piano in the corner. On top of it, a piece of sheet music, the same one she had seen weeks before, the one he had hastily hidden. This time he hadn't removed it. In fact, it looked like he'd left it out on purpose. "Did you write it?" she asked softly. He turned slowly. The lamplight cast deep shadows across his face. "No," he said. "My father. He used to play it when things were at their worst. He said some notes could heal what doctors couldn't name." Eleanor brushed the edge of the page with her fingertip. "And you?" "I haven't played in years. Music reminds me of things I'd rather not relive." A long silence followed, heavy with everything unspoken. And then, as if something in him finally gave way, he stood. He walked toward her with steady, unhurried steps. He stopped just short of touching distance. "I chose you out of fear," he said, his voice low, restrained, almost pained. "I thought if I chose you, it wouldn't hurt, that you would stand beside me without asking for anything, that you would be a refuge, not a fire." Eleanor didn't move. She looked straight into his eyes, unwavering. "I thought you'd never matter to me," he went on, "that I could have you close without being forced to feel. But I lied. I pretended. I pretended I didn't need you. I pretended you were invisible because I was seeing you more than I could bear." Eleanor lowered her gaze. When she looked up again, her eyes shimmered, not with overflowing tears, but with the kind of fullness that spills from a single crack. "I don't want to be an obligation," she whispered. "I couldn't bear to become that." Alistair lifted his hand as if to touch her, but stopped halfway. Then he stepped closer, and instead of kissing her or reaching for her lips, he simply embraced her, wrapped his arms around her as if she might break if held too tightly. And she rested her forehead on his shoulder and let the silence speak. There were no promises, no declarations, just one body against another, one breath shared. A tremor not born of desire, but of something far deeper, the realization that one is no longer alone, that someone, without saying it, has begun to live inside you. When they pulled apart, Eleanor said nothing. She walked to the door slowly. At the threshold, she turned back for a moment. Her eyes still glistened, but her face was calm. Alistair didn't move. He remained near the piano, the music still open before him. And for the first time since they had met, he didn't seem inclined to hide it. That night, Eleanor fell asleep, with something in her heart she couldn't yet name. It wasn't hope. It wasn't triumph. It was the quiet certainty that, even if he didn't realize it yet, something inside him had begun to yield, and in that surrender, perhaps at last, love could begin to bloom. Summer at Wycliffe Estate didn't arrive with noise, but with a quiet warmth that lulled the stones and perfumed the air with lavender and damp earth. Brief rains left puddles that mirrored the sky, and in the corridors, the footsteps of maids and footmen echoed with the steady rhythm of those who live in a world without upheaval. But in one of the main sitting rooms, where the light slipped through the tall windows like a golden caress, something more than the season had begun to change. Eleanor and Lord Montgomery, without any formal agreement or spoken promises, had shifted their routine. The breakfasts they once took separately were now shared in the South Wing gallery. At first they sat at a distance, he with his newspaper, she with an agricultural treatise or a book of verse. But slowly, the space between them began to shrink. A comment on the news, an observation about the weather, a subtle smile at a poetic line, and the silence that had once loomed between them began to soften. They didn't speak of love. The word was never uttered, but they built it in their own quiet way, in the coffee she served without asking, because she already knew how he liked it, in their walks along the garden paths where he listened attentively to her ideas for new plantings, in the late afternoons when she read aloud, and he sat in calm stillness, eyes fixed not on the pages but on the lips forming each word. There was something deep in the way they looked at each other without needing to touch, a tenderness without a name, revealed in small gestures, when he offered her a shawl if the air grew chilly, or when she, silently, sensed the exact moment to leave him alone in his study. They weren't a couple from a romantic novel. They were two souls who had chosen each other without vows, who were discovering each other without haste. Even the village rumors began to shift. Where once people had referred to Eleanor as the other sister, the one chosen out of pity or convenience, they now said something else. They said the Marquess listened to her in a way he never had with anyone, that his gaze lingered on her with respect, that while they weren't demonstrative, they were seen together more and more. At the local tavern, the betting had changed from how long the marriage would last to how many acres would bloom under the new lady's care, and that title, Lady of the House, was beginning to suit her naturally. She didn't flaunt it. She didn't drape herself in unnecessary finery. Her sobriety remained, but her bearing had shifted. She walked with her head held high, and her voice, still soft, carried the firmness of someone who knew she was being heard. But where there is balance, there is always someone who seeks to tip the scale. Catherine, the sister who once ruled, through charm and presence, began to feel her power slipping away. She had been gone for several weeks, visiting her cousin in Warwick, but upon her return, she found the estate transformed. The servants greeted her with less enthusiasm. Lady Margaret no longer clung to her every opinion, and worst of all, Eleanor no longer lowered her eyes when Catherine spoke. She held her gaze, calm, unwavering. This new certainty was unbearable for Catherine. Even more unbearable was witnessing how Alistair and Eleanor met without seeking one another, how they shared silences that no longer felt awkward, how he leaned slightly closer when she spoke. Catherine began to observe, first discreetly, then deliberately. One afternoon, as the garden shadows stretched long across the grass, Catherine moved silently through the halls, barefoot, to avoid being heard. She stopped outside the Marquess's study, where the half-open door let out a warm light. Inside, Eleanor and Alistair were having tea, seated across from one another. Eleanor was laughing softly at something he had said, and he looked at her with an expression only seen when every wall has been lowered. "I didn't know you still remembered that melody," Eleanor said quietly. "I did," Alistair replied. "I just never dared play it again, until you looked at it like it mattered." "Everything we keep hidden," she whispered, "is usually what belongs most to us." Catherine, hearing those words, felt the ground shift beneath her. It wasn't just Eleanor's voice that stung, it was the intimacy, the quiet bond. That kind of tenderness Catherine had never known with Alistair or with any man, no matter how hard she had tried. She stepped back without making a sound, but her chest burned. She knew now that disdain would no longer be enough. Eleanor was no longer a shadow easily dismissed. If Catherine wanted to reclaim what she believed was hers, the center, the attention, the influence, she would have to act. And she would, because if there was one thing Catherine couldn't stand, it was losing without a fight. That night, the full moon cast silver over the walls of Wycliffe Estate. Eleanor slept with the calm of someone who had found a quiet corner of peace, and Alistair, alone in his study, remained awake, his eyes resting on the music sheet atop the piano, a faint smile playing on his lips. Somewhere else in the house, however, a restless mind was already plotting, because while love grows in silence, so does envy, and not always does the one who loves most prevail, but the one who knows exactly where to press the thorn. The grand halls of Wycliffe Estate had not hosted a ball in over 3 years. The crystal chandeliers had remained covered with linen cloths, the waxed floors used only for the quiet rhythm of daily footsteps, and the orchids from the greenhouse adorned only the most private corners of the house. But that afternoon, with servants rushing about to light candles, polish candelabras, and hang garlands of magnolia, everything suggested that tonight would be an exception. Catherine had orchestrated every detail. With her sweetest smile and most charming tone, she had convinced several noble families from the region to accept her invitation. The ball wasn't in her honor, she was merely the hostess, but everything bore her signature, from the wine-colored curtains to the musicians traveling in from London. The official reason was a celebration of the blooming fields, but everyone knew the real motive. Catherine wanted to reclaim her place in the household and in the heart of the man who never truly loved her. By dusk, the house gleamed with a near-magical glow. The scent of flowers mingled with the expensive perfumes brought from overseas, and the murmur of early conversations floated through the air like a promise. Catherine descended the staircase in a dark green satin gown, a golden, snake-shaped brooch securing her lace shawl. She was radiant, and she knew it. Everything about her spoke of control, of cunning. Her goal was clear: to humiliate with elegance, to rule without raising her voice. Eleanor was slow to come down. She wore an ivory dress, unadorned, but with an elegant drape that highlighted the calm dignity of her posture. She wore no jewelry aside from a pair of pearl earrings inherited from her grandmother. She entered the ballroom not seeking glances, not craving attention. Yet she received it. Guests, seeing her on Lord Montgomery's arm, didn't know what to say. Some whispered about her understated beauty. Others noted the clear connection between her and the Marquess. Catherine watched from a corner, feigning conversation with a widowed count while gripping her fan harder than necessary. Then she made her move. First, a subtle comment to an older marchioness. Poor Eleanor. So sweet, so quiet, but so delicate. They say she won't be able to bear heirs. Then a carefully timed smile to a young viscount. The marriage made sense, of course, but between us, I doubt there's love. The words spread like poisonous ivy, not shouted, not scandalous, just rumors, hints, and in high society those cut deeper than any accusation. Eleanor didn't hear them. She was speaking with a lady about French literature when she noticed the shift in the room. The once kind glances became more guarded. Smiles grew strained. Some women even turned away as if afraid to catch an invisible illness. Alistair noticed everything. He didn't need to hear each whisper. It was enough to see the tight expressions of certain gentlemen, the uneasy murmurs that always circled near Catherine, the way some women looked at Eleanor as if she were a tragedy in gloves. Without hesitation, he crossed the ballroom. Eleanor saw him coming and felt a tightness in her chest. She feared he might draw distance, do something to step away. But what he did left everyone speechless. He stopped in front of her, extended his hand, and, mid-conversation with nearby guests, took hers with firm resolve. Not as a gentleman guiding a lady onto the floor, but as a man affirming what he felt, as someone declaring without words that he held no shame in his choice. That he had no doubt. Eleanor fell silent. Her skin burned under that simple, yet powerful contact. Her eyes held no tears, no blush, only a new clarity. And in Alistair's, a determination few had ever imagined possible in a man once content to walk alone in the shadows. The ballroom stilled. Words dissolved on tongues. Even the music seemed to soften. From her corner, Catherine turned pale. The golden serpent on her brooch seemed to mock her. This was not the ending she had plotted. Instead of shaming her sister, she had ignited the very fire she hoped to snuff out. The evening continued, but everything had changed. The glances turned elsewhere. Catherine no longer reigned. Without effort, without trying, it was Eleanor who now held the room. She glowed in the quiet light of a love still unnamed, but undeniable. That night, when the house had fallen silent, Alistair did not return to his room. He walked to Eleanor's door, pausing as if still uncertain, but he didn't hesitate. He knocked once. She opened it without surprise. Neither spoke. He entered. and stayed. It was not a night of passion or stolen kisses. It was a night of presence, of steady breathing, of two bodies that no longer feared each other. They shared the bed like two people sharing a secret. And for the first time since that marriage forged in cold silence, there was warmth. Later, while he slept, Eleanor rose, quietly. She walked to the library, lit a small lamp, and sat before her jewelry box. She opened the walnut lid carefully. Inside, among a few family trinkets, lay the unsigned note. She took it out. She read it again. "Your absence is more uncomfortable than your presence." For the first time, she smiled. Reading it, then, without thinking, she brought the paper to her lips and kissed it, not as one kisses an anonymous letter, but as one honors a wound that has turned into a root. Because now, she knew that those words, whether born of cruelty or denial, had marked the beginning of something real: silence. Once their constant companion was no longer a wall, it was a bridge. Morning spilled in golden threads over the rooftops of the Withmore estate, as if summer, still not quite arrived on the calendar, was beginning to announce itself with the scent of hay and ripened light. Eleanor woke with the first rays filtering. Through the lace curtains, her body felt light, no fever, no anxiety, just a new kind of silence, one that didn't come from absence, but from peace. Don Alistair hadn't visited her that night, nor did she expect him to, and yet it didn't hurt. The room still held his presence, a sprig of lavender on the bedside table, a carefully placed book by Montaigne, a folded blanket at the foot of the bed. They weren't declarations, they were gestures, and in them Eleanor had begun to read, a language more sincere than any whispered promise. She descended the stairs with quiet confidence, wearing a slate blue dress that draped elegantly over her figure. Her limp, less visible when she moved with calm, did not mark her steps that chased. Morning, she wasn't walking to please anyone nor to be seen. She walked because this was her home, her life, her place. In the dining room, Don Alistair was already waiting. He wore a graphite-colored frock coat, a neatly tied cravat, and a small white rose freshly cut and tucked into his lapel. When he saw her, he stood, not hastily, but with a courtesy he hadn't shown in the early days of their marriage. "Good morning, Eleanor," he said, his voice carrying a new tone, not sweetness, but genuine respect. "Good morning, Alistair," she replied, meeting his gaze without hesitation. They had breakfast together, as they had many times before, but something had shifted. She noticed the way he looked at her, not intrusively, but as one who witnesses something beginning to bloom. And when she set her cup down on the porcelain saucer, her fingers trembled slightly, not from nerves, but because that deep, steady gaze was beginning to stir something long dormant inside her. After breakfast, they rode out together to visit the lands of the estate. The property stretched into rolling paths flanked by vineyards, orchards, and olive groves, and the carriage moved slowly, giving their eyes time to rest on the landscape. In every village they passed, peasants came out to greet them. It was the first time they'd seen the new Marchioness of Llanos, and they expected a distant regal figure, cold hands, and formal words. But Eleanor didn't wave from the carriage, like a porcelain statue. She stepped down, she walked among them, she listened. She patted the heads of children, asked about the harvests, inquired after the wells, the schools, the winter ailments. Her voice wasn't condescending or rehearsed. It was calm, natural, and that closeness, so rare in a woman of her status, began to win over eyes, hearts, and smiles. Don Alistair watched from a short distance as she spoke, with an elderly farmer beside a pomegranate tree. He didn't interrupt. He didn't correct her. He simply watched with an expression that hovered between astonishment and quiet admiration. At last, he understood he had not chosen a woman without fire. He had chosen a flame that didn't need to boast to burn, That night, back at the house, he entered his study with the intention of writing his usual business letters, but he paused in front of the mirror. Almost unconsciously, he touched, and an old scar just visible at his right temple beneath the hairline. It wasn't deep, but it still ached. He had earned it in his youth, not from a fall, but from a goodbye. The woman he had loved, or so he thought, ran away with an Italian count the night before their wedding. She left a short letter and a dried flower between the pages of a poetry book. Since then, he had wrapped his heart in marble. Until now, a week later, Doña Margaret fell ill. It was a slow, steady decline, like an old tree quietly beginning to give way. The widowed countess, who had never accepted the word weakness in her vocabulary, was laid low by persistent fever that confined her to bed. Doctors came and went with furrowed brows. The teas had no effect, and though she clung to her pride, she could no longer hide the tremor in her hands or the dimness in her eyes. Eleanor cared for her, without resentment, without reproach. She read her favorite psalms aloud, adjusted her pillows, wiped her brow. With rose water, offered her tea with gentleness, never a word of blame, just a constant, dignified, warm presence. One early morning, as the wind moaned through the beams and the house slept beneath a moonless sky, Doña Margaret opened her eyes and reached for her eldest daughter's hand. "Eleanor," she whispered, "I never truly saw you." Eleanor said nothing. "I made you live in the shadows. I always thought of you as a duty, not a soul." Eleanor leaned in and whispered, soft as a feather's touch, "I didn't live to be seen. I lived to be worthy." The Countess closed her eyes. There were no tears. Just a slight tremor of redemption, as if that simple sentence had restored meaning to a life lost in pride. She died at dawn. Eleanor didn't cry in public. She didn't collapse onto the coffin or shroud herself in theatrical mourning, but that night, alone in her room, she opened the jewelry box where she kept the unsigned love notes and added a lock of white hair tied with black ribbon. Because even the hardest mothers, when they leave, carve a strange hollow in the flesh. The following days passed in quiet solemnity. Catherine, more absent than ever, did not return for the morning. The visitors dwindled, and for a time, the house wrapped itself in a respectful stillness. Then, one afternoon, as the rain began to perfume the soil with the scent of ancient memory, Eleanor entered the music room, perhaps without thinking, or perhaps not. She sat at the piano, placed her fingers on the keys with a slowness that felt almost sacred. The velvet of the bench creaked beneath her dress, and the air held the kind of electricity that precedes something rare. Before her, on the music stand, lay the forgotten score, the one he had hidden for years, the one her father had composed but never played again. Eleanor began to play. She wasn't a virtuoso. She didn't try to be. But her fingers, thin and pale, pressed the notes with a tenderness born of soul, not technique. And the melody, melancholic and beautiful, expanded through the silent halls like a long, healing sigh. Alistair listened from the doorway. He didn't speak. He didn't enter. He didn't interrupt. He watched her with a mixture of longing, awe, and quiet affection. As if, at last, everything he had feared to feel had transformed into grace. Eleanor didn't see him, but she knew, and in that music, in that room where everything had once been denied and now gently given, something profound occurred. Two wounded souls found the same melody, one that didn't speak of yesterday or tomorrow, only of the present, of what endures when it's finally allowed to bloom. And she, Eleanor of Withmore, was no longer the overlooked sister. She was the rose that bloomed among ruins. And he, Don Alistair Montgomery, was the man who had learned at last that not every scar means defeat. Some are paths. Spring arrived like a long, soft exhale across the lands of the estate in Birmingham, infusing every corner with new life and fragrant silences. The fields turned green with a vibrancy that seemed to rise from the soul of Wycliffe Manor itself, and bold birds sang melodies that drifted in through the open windows like nameless blessings. Everything was in bloom, but nothing compared to her. Catherine left quietly. No long farewells, no tears, no hugs. At dawn, her carriage vanished into the mist of the old road, leaving only the scent of expensive perfume and unspoken words behind. She claimed to be heading to London to clear her mind, though everyone knew she left defeated. The mirror that once reflected her confidence now reflected a woman who failed to see the roots of what thrives in silence. No one stopped her, not even Lady Margaret, whose portrait in the Great Hall regarded Catherine's departure with the same stern stillness, even in death. Eleanor, however, stayed behind in the South Gallery, seated at the wrought iron table. With a cup of tea in her hands, gazing at the blooming almond trees, she didn't ask about her sister. She didn't comment on her departure. She didn't need to. She understood that some farewells happen in the heart long before footsteps cross the threshold. That same month, work began without warning on the northern end of the estate. Workers arrived at dawn and departed at dusk, hauling beams, glass, panels, and iron structures from afar. Eleanor didn't question it. She watched from a distance, quietly aware that sometimes answers arrive on their own. One afternoon, while strolling among the roses in her wide-brimmed sun hat, Lord Montgomery approached her. His hair was slightly tousled by the breeze, and he wore a restrained smile as though guarding a secret. "Shall we go?" he asked, extending his hand. She took it wordlessly. Together they walked along familiar paths, crossing fields still, damp from recent rains, until they reached a newly built structure, unfinished but already standing with the promise of permanence, the greenhouse. Spacious and arching, its high glass panes reflected light like mirrors to the sky. Inside, the scent of fresh earth mingled with delicate aromas of camellias, white, pink, deep crimson, dozens of them, arranged carefully in light wood planters, paths lined with stone. "I had these brought from Cornwall," he murmured, watching her take it in. "Each named as you would choose them, as you do, and understand them." Eleanor regarded him, not surprised, but with that quiet wonder born when the soul is touched gently. "Why this?" she asked softly. He took a steady breath, meeting her gaze. "Because here is where I learned to see you, and I want a place that bears your mark, even when you don't touch it." Eleanor walked through the greenhouse slowly, her steps deliberate, her hand resting lightly on her now rounded belly. No words were needed. Her body spoke clearly. The child she carried was not merely the result of a union born from convenience, turned destiny. He was the living seed of a story that had begun with a mother's dismissal, a sister's silence, and a man's resistance, and had grown into love. In the village, opinions shifted too. She was no longer called the other sister. Now she was known as the silent Marchioness, the one who healed by her calm, the one who mended without demand, the one who looked at the Marquess in a way no one had, and quietly transformed him. Some said she had cast a spell, others called her a saint. But the wisest, those with soil under their fingernails and work in their hands, knew Eleanor didn't cast spells. She simply loved without show. And in a world of shouting voices, that is as close to a miracle as one can get. Every afternoon they walked together, Eleanor and Alistair, hand in hand, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing thoughts without hurry. They owned the fields, but never walked with arrogance. They walked as though offering thanks to time, to each other. One evening, as the sun edged toward its decline and the sky shimmered with ochre and coral, Alistair paused under a flowering cherry tree. He slid his arm around her waist and leaned in to whisper against her ear. His words, barely more than a breath, settled into her soul like petals on still water. It wasn't fear, it was destiny. And this time, I choose you with my heart. Eleanor. closed her eyes, not from overwhelming emotion, but from gratitude, from peace, from truth. She smiled, a new kind of smile, not one of resignation or polite duty, one who is no longer afraid to be seen, who no longer hides, even from herself, the smile of a woman fully alive. That night, the library waited in quiet dusk. Oil lamps burned with peaceful flames. The fireplace crackled softly, and the only other sound was the rustle of pages touched by careful fingers. Eleanor climbed the steps with a book in her hands, not to read, but to leave something behind. She opened the well-worn volume, one on essays about the human spirit, and gently tucked a yellowed, fragile page inside. It was the unsigned note she'd found earlier in her gardening tools, the one that said, "Your absence is more unsettling than your presence." She didn't do it out of nostalgia or sentimentality. She did it as a testimony, because even the quietest love deserves remembrance, because silences leave marks as well. And sometimes the truest love doesn't rise from what is proclaimed, but from what endures after all else has fallen silent. With a measured hand, she closed the book and placed it back on the shelf, planting a seed that didn't need to bloom for the world to see. Then she extinguished the lamp and walked out. Before crossing the threshold, she paused. Alistair stood in the doorway, silent. His eyes spoke to her, to the woman who had been invisible, to the girl who grew up without applause, to the wife who arrived without promises, to the mother now forming inside her own body. And in that shared look, there was no fire, no rush, just a mature love, deep, one that doesn't fear silence nor needs adornment, one that remains, one that even in the shadows blossoms. That night, Wycliffe Manor at last became the home of two souls who had learned, one to be seen, the other to truly look. And through that shared lesson, Eleanor ceased to be invisible. She wasn't the sister who lived in the corners anymore. She was the rose that survived winter. She was the legacy of the woman who, in her quiet tenderness, transformed a man who believed he did not know how to love. She did it not with grand words, not with scenes, not with noise, but with the invincible strength of love that doesn't demand but transforms, with love that doesn't impose but stays. 10 years had passed since that spring when Eleanor first laid her hands on the forgotten sheet music. A full decade had drifted over the fields of Birmingham, like the wind through barley, silent, constant, inevitable. And yet, some things neither time nor silence could erase. Wycliffe Manor still stood, more alive than ever. The camellias in the greenhouse, no longer new, bloomed with the stubbornness of all things deeply rooted in fertile soil. Each season brought a different explosion of color, and visitors from nearby counties and even abroad often said the place wasn't just a greenhouse, but a sanctuary shaped by quiet love. The Marchioness Eleanor Montgomery, now 37, walked the garden paths with steady steps, though still with a slight limp. Her figure, fuller now, retained the same dignified elegance that had set her apart since youth. Her hair, simply pinned, bore the first silver strands with pride. She never hid them. Each one was a testament to a life lived with depth by her. Side the Marquess, Alistair was often seen, his temples grayer now, his gaze softer. He wasn't a man transformed, but a man revealed. The silence that once shielded him now allowed him to listen better, to observe with tenderness. In the village, it was said he never raised his voice, and that when he spoke his wife's name, he did so as if uttering a prayer. They had 3 children. The first, a girl named Clara, was born in the middle of a summer storm, with her mother's gray eyes and her father's early seriousness. The second, a boy named Julian, came 2 years later, dark-haired, serene. The third, Esperanza, arrived unexpectedly, with a soft cry and a smile that melted even the sternest hearts. The children grew up surrounded by books, rich soil, music, sheets, and old stories. They knew by heart the tale of how their mother had taught the stone man how to feel. And they listened to it the way one listens to stories that may sound like fables, but are undeniably true. In the village, things changed as well. The women began meeting once a month at the old schoolhouse, where Eleanor started a reading and sewing circle. There they shared not only recipes and prayers, but letters, thoughts and dreams that had long remained unspoken. Girls learned to read without being told to stay quiet. Men no longer saw the Marchioness as a distant figure, but as a steady presence, one who listened and demanded with fairness. She was respected not for her title, but for her unwavering presence. Catherine never returned to the manor after her departure. She settled in London, where her life was filled with noisy social affairs, marked by banquets, gossip, and disappointment. She never married. She lived surrounded by mirrors and memories, longing for a place she had refused to call home. Some said she still wrote letters she never sent. Others claimed she collected newspaper clippings with mentions of the Marquess and his wife. The last known image of her showed her standing by a window, alone, with an old snake-shaped brooch gleaming. On her chest, an empty token of a battle long lost. The memory of Lady Margaret still echoed through the manor's halls. Her portrait remained in the main parlor, but it no longer inspired fear. Her name was spoken with respect, not dread. Her grandchildren remembered her as a strict woman, yes, but one who, in the end, had asked for forgiveness, and that, they said, was also a kind of courage. One April afternoon, as the cherry trees dressed in white again, Eleanor walked alone into the library. Dust floated in the air like the ashes of memories, and sunlight slipped through the curtains with the gentleness of things that no time can no longer harm them. She paused before the center shelf, then pulled out a brown leather-bound book. Slowly she opened it, caressing the pages like the skin of an old friend. There, still intact, was the yellowed note. "Your absence is more unsettling than your presence." She didn't smile. She didn't sigh. She simply closed her eyes for a moment, as if hearing a long-forgotten melody once more. Then she placed the note back where it belonged, closed the book, and returned it to the shelf. She needed nothing else, because she, Eleanor of Wycliffe, Marchioness by title, mother by fate, woman by choice, was no longer invisible. She had ceased to be a shadow and become the root, the solid ground, the quiet beacon. And as she returned to the drawing room where her children and the man who finally had chosen her with his heart were waiting, the scent of camellias hung gently in the air like a promise fulfilled. Some loves are born from thunder, but the ones that last are always born from silence. They say the deepest stories aren't the ones that shout, but the ones that whisper to the soul. Eleanor and Alistair showed us that you don't have to shine to be seen or raise your voice to be heard. Sometimes true love is born in the quiet, in restrained gestures, in eyes that learn to look beyond. Appearances? Eleanor, the invisible woman, taught us that dignity needs no applause, that steady tenderness can tear down the coldest walls, and that even the hardest hearts can learn to love. If they find someone who doesn't give up on their silence. And you? What did you learn from this story? At what moment did your heart tremble? If you've made it this far, type camellias in the comments. That way, we'll know how many hearts walked with us to the end of this journey, and you'll help this story reach more people who love historical romance as much as you do. And if this story moved you, don't miss the other tales linked in the cards. Each one holds a sigh, a secret, an impossible love that might just deserve to bloom too. Thank you for being here. Until the next story.